Exercise 22.3 harkens back to the old days when bookstores sold books and you didn't have to go past the barista with her ventis and scones to get to the classics. Well, these are one of those kinds of bookstores where you have odd old people working as the sales staff and you could smell books. The good old days, 2012. Anyhow, this business, like many business, has two kinds of departments. It has service departments, like the advertising department and the purchasing department, that have expenses but really don't generate any revenue. They have no way to pay for them. And they have functional departments or revenue departments that generate revenue, use these services, but don't pay for them unless we allocate them. So our goal is to get the total allocation to the ad department for advertising to 0, and the total allocation to the purchasing department for purchasing to 0. Now, if we're going to make those go to 0, we have to allocate those costs to the functional departments, the revenue departments, in some fashion. Well, you could add them together, divide by 3, and give a third, a third, and a third. But that really isn't the best way to do it. A better way to do it is to take a look at the departments and decide how much we're going to do based on some driver that we decide, something that we decide makes this department use money. Well, the advertising department, we decided that we were going to allocate these costs based on sales. So the total number of sales was how we were going to allocate the advertising department. And for the purchasing department, we were going to allocate their sales based on the number of purchase orders. So we're going to look at the total sales for all three departments and decide what portion of it is the newspapers, what portion of it is the magazines, what portion of it is the books. And that's how we're going to allocate the advertising costs. With the purchasing departments, we're going to look at purchase orders. And we're going to see how many purchase orders are from the newspaper department, the magazine department, and the book department, and we'll allocate those accordingly. And if you look at the problem, they give you a chart, which I cleverly enough did not print out because I wanted to make your life just a little more surrealistic. And they tell us that the book department, and I'm getting this information from page 1017, the book department has $495,000 in sales, and they place 516 purchase orders. Then they tell us that the magazine department has $198,000 in sales. Now that everybody can get their porn online, they probably don't have to buy magazines. And that's 360 purchase orders. And this information is right from the text. And newspapers gives you an idea how far back this is. It's 207,000. And they placed 324 purchase orders, which I don't understand. You would think they would know in advance that there's 365 days in a year, and just why not call the newspaper and say, send us a bundle every day. But we'll make pretend that that makes sense. So if we add up the total sales, that comes to 900,000. You add up the total purchase orders, that comes to 1,200. We're now going to say 495,900 thousandths of the advertising department belongs to the book department. 198 over 900 times 24 belongs to magazines, and 207 over 900 times 24 is what we're going to allocate to newspapers. So that's what we're going to do. So let's first figure out the percentages, because if I have to sit there and figure out 207,900 thousandths, I'm going to go nutser than I already am. So let's work on that first. Make it a little bigger so you can see it. So the book department is 495. I'm going to leave off the zeros to make it a little easier. I'll use different color ink so we can see it easier. The magazines was 198. And the newspapers was 207. And that was a total of 900,000. So I'm going to take 495 over 900. I'll try to squeeze that in there one time. 495 divided by 900, and that's 55%. So 55% of total sales are allocated to the book department. We do 198 over 900,000. That comes up to 22%. So 22% of the advertising costs belong to the magazine department, and we'll do 207 over 900, and that gives us 23% belongs to the newspaper department. Now we're just going to take those percentages and multiply by the cost, 24,000. So we're going to take 55% of 24,000, and we're going to allocate 55% of the advertising cost to the book department. And when we do that, that's 13,200. We're going to take 22% of the $24,000 advertising expense and allocate it to the magazine department. This is very similar to the basket purchase you did in financial accounting when we bought a building and land and vehicles and all of that. Very, very similar. So when we take 22% of 198,000, we come up with 5,280, and we'll take 23% of 207,000, and that gives us 5,520. Now, just because I'm doing this math on 1/2 of 1 cup of coffee, I'm going to add that up to make sure, and it does indeed add up to 24,000. So these are the costs that we're going to allocate to the various departments for advertising. We're going to do the same thing for purchasing, but on purchasing we're going to do it by total purchase orders. Let me move my papers around here so I got my notes handy, because believe me, 1/2 of 1 cup of coffee, you don't want to see me doing this without looking at my notes. That would be like a Rosie O'Donnell ugly. So the book department places 516 purchase orders. The magazine department places 360 purchase orders, and the newspaper department places 324 purchase orders, for a total of 1,200 purchase orders from all three departments annually. We're going to use that as the basis for allocating the purchasing department's expenses to the three functional departments. We're going to do the same thing we did before, 516 over 1200, 360 over 1200, 324 over 1200 to get the percentage. And when we do that math, that comes out to 43%, 30%, and 27%. Multiply 43% of the 34,000 purchasing expenses, and we'll allocate that to the books department. Different color ink so you can see it a little better. And that comes to 14,620 to books. Okay. Now we're going to take 30% of 34,000 and allocate that to the magazine department. And that's 10,200 to mags. And the newspaper department, we're going to do the same thing. 27% of the 34,000, or 9,180, goes to newspapers. And again, because it's early, I'm going to add, and that does indeed add up to 34,000. Perhaps I should quit now since I got two numbers in a row correct, but we'll push on. Now we're going to fill out this silly little chart because this text loves charts. So let's fill in this chart and make these folks happy. And let's put some lines down here so we don't have to try and figure out what's what. I'm just going to separate out these departments. Remember, these are functional departments. They generate revenue. These are service departments. So we're going to allocate those expenses to the functional departments from the service departments. So for advertising, books gets 13,200. For advertising. Magazines gets 5,280. And newspapers gets 5,520. That's the advertising. That's how we're allocating the advertising expense. So we've taken this 24,000, made it go to zero because it makes no sense to charge the advertising department for advertising department expenses. Now we're going to do the same thing with the purchasing department. The purchasing department, we had 14,620 went to books. $10,200 went to magazines. And the remainder, 9,180, goes to newspapers. Now we're going to sum those columns. And when we sum the book column, and I think I should do this just to make sure, because as you have seen, I can't draw a straight line with a ruler most times. So when we allocate this to the books, we've gotten rid of these expenses, but the total expenses have to stay the same, because just because we've allocated them doesn't mean they go away. It just means somebody else is paying them. So when we allocate them, that comes to 452,820 for books. Magazines, you add these together, it goes to 5,480. And newspapers, 139,700. What we have done, and if you add that up across this way, you'll see you come up with the same. So if you want to check, you can add this way, and you should get that number. And you add this way to get that number. So, if your handwriting was a whole lot neater than mine, or you had taken the time to print out your answer, it would look just like that. You see, what we've done is we've allocated all of the service expenses to the revenue departments, the functional departments, and we've not charged the service departments anything for their own services. This happens very commonly in businesses, and if a business has 10 or 12 or 15 departments, they may have 10 or 12 or 15 allocations.